Please join me in welcoming our House Representative District 43 candidates, Lisa Shin and Chris Chandler. Just a few ground rules. We're going to have opening statements up to 5 minutes. And then we have 7 questions. We'll try and get through as many of them as we can. We will alternate who gets to answer first. We'll begin with Chris, just alphabetically. You will have up to 3 minutes to answer those. And at the end, hopefully we will have enough time for 3-minute, 5-minute, whatever you need, closing statements.
Hello, my name's Christine Chandler. I'm the Democratic candidate for House Seat 43. And first, I'd like to thank Ren, Patrick, and the chamber members for organizing this event. To start, I would like to share a little bit about my background with you. I have lived in Los Alamos for about 25 years. I was an in-house attorney and an attorney manager at the laboratory for nearly 27 years before my retirement. I spent a year interning at DOE and the State Department when I was on a leave of absence to earn an LLM degree in international law. These experiences have given me a strong understanding of the laboratory, the federal contracting system, and the interplay of the federal government, the lab, and our community. Since moving to Los Alamos, I have been involved in many civic volunteer activities. In addition to 2 terms on the council, Los Alamos County Council, I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was a founding board member of the Public Schools Foundation and Leadership Los Alamos. I also served on the board of the YMCA. I am currently on the board of the Firstborn Program of Los Alamos and the Dell Foundation. Since retiring, I became a principal in a law practice with my husband, and for 4 legislative sessions, I have worked as a senior analyst for the Senate Judiciary Committee. My work in the legislature has given me a good understanding of not only the politics and mechanics of legislating, but the issues and the diverse constituencies. I'd like to offer an answer to the following question. What role should the state and local government play in support of economic development and diversification? I think the primary role that government can play is to provide a strong foundation that will draw and support local businesses as well as new businesses that choose to locate here. These are the types of things that I mean. A strong public education system that ensures an adequate education for all New Mexico children. Enhanced support for our schools of higher education, particularly in areas of vocational and technical training. Programs that support increasing access to affordable and workforce housing. Lack of affordable housing is not unique to Los Alamos. Santa Fe is really feeling the pressure as well. Improving our infrastructure, roads, utilities, and internet. Increased access to health care, particularly for the working poor. I believe that these are critical components to support an economy that will grow and eventually thrive. Thank you.
Okay. Well, my name is Lisa Shin, and 21 years ago I came to Los Alamos to build my practice. And back then I started off with just 1 employee, and I lived in the Gold Street apartments. And I would barely made enough to cover rent. And slowly, like many of you, I built my practice, and I built my small business, through relationships, building trust, respect in the community, offering high-quality goods and services. And so, like you, I understand budgets, taxes, meeting payroll. I understand the challenges that are facing small businesses. And I am 100% committed to being an advocate for you and me, the small business owners of our town and this district. One thing that I'm 100% committed to is lowering the tax burden on small business owners. As you know, when you have an onerous tax code and when you have increased taxes, it falls on the small business owners, because we are not in that tier where we are eligible for public assistance, but we're not millionaires. So whenever there is something that affects taxes and tax code, the burden falls on us. And we all understand that very, very well. So one thing that I'm 100% committed to is tax reform, making sure that we can reform this code that has winners and losers. You know, if you are a big corporation, then you're eligible for that loophole and you're exempt. But if you're a small business owner and you're in a certain industry, you might not be eligible for that exemption. I think we need to work towards a more fair and equitable tax code. We need to work towards a more fair and equitable tax code. And that has bipartisan support in our state legislature, and that's something that I'm going to be very focused on. And that's all I have.
Okay, so for the question period, we'll have a 1-minute warning sign and a 30-second warning sign, just to, so the candidates can keep track of how much time they have. So I'll start with the first question, and yeah, we'll have Chris answer this first, and then we'll have Lisa answer the second question first. So we'd like to start off, I think, by thanking UNMLA for hosting our events every month, and kind of as a thank you to them. The first question will relate to UNMLA and institutions like that. How do you see the role of institutions like UNMLA in meeting the need for education and workforce development in the state?
I think that institutions like UNMLA play a critical role, particularly in supporting trade and vocational training. This school has a number of programs where it partners with employers in the area to ensure that there's a workforce available for the employers here. Certainly Lanol's an obvious answer, but there are other employers that the school has partnered with, such as Los Alamos County. It has implemented a fire protection program in support of Los Alamos County and others, because obviously students who attend this school will benefit and have a career opportunity off the hill as well as on the hill. So these are examples of things that schools such as this can do. But to do that, they need the funding and the support of the legislature, and that is where we will most obviously come into play. The funding formula for higher ed needs to be changed to add new monies so that these sorts of programs can be offered and enhanced and expanded. And I don't mean just for here, of course, but for the other two-year colleges and the other independent schools such as Santa Fe Community College, which also has a very vibrant and robust program in support of training students for career opportunities. We also need to look at the dual credit system to ensure that the school gets new monies in support of it. That is also an excellent program that allows high school students to take courses here, not just academic courses, but also trade courses such as machining. There's a machinist program here that's very important, but we need to make sure that there's an equitable distribution of the funds so that UNMLA doesn't take any money from the public school system, because it's critical that they are fully funded. That's a very important goal, but we need additional funds so that dual credit programs can thrive across the state as well, because high school students will benefit from trade programs also. Schools also need to schools of higher ed, such as this one, need to fairly compensate their instructors. What we're seeing here, instructors and professors, what we're seeing here is that because of the pay scale that this school has and other schools have, there's a temptation to want to take a job at the lab. And so the lab is attracting very competent English professors and science professors and so on, and we need those folks here as well. So these are a few ideas that I have in terms of how we can support programs such as this. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, UNMLA plays a critical role in the middle skills training. And as you know, New Mexico has a serious gap when it comes to middle skills in IT, in health sciences, machinist, all of these trades, there is a gap. And UNMLA can play a critical role in training that workforce. And I definitely think that we need to strengthen programs at UNMLA for our middle skills workforce. Also, UNMLA can play a very important role in training for jobs for the lab. And I would love to see more of a partnership with the lab and our UNMLA to train and expand our workforce. Thank you.
Lisa will have to answer this one first. If elected, what specifically can you do at the state level to improve the economic climate for businesses in Los Alamos County?
Right. Well, again, as I said before, I think the tax reform is critical. You know, I think we have to ease that tax burden so that we can attract more businesses to our state. Tax reform is the key to job creation, and that's something that I would be very focused on. One thing that I want to point out is this tax legislation, SB 17, which Councilor Chandler was a strong advocate for. I do think it would have had a negative impact on our community and on our state. It would have impacted job creation, and it would have negatively impacted the ability of the lab to expand its infrastructure, its science and technology and engineering base. And so that's something that I think was not quite the right approach, and I think I would have looked at that a little bit more differently. We want to be competitive as a state. And I think legislation like SB 17, where we're imposing taxes on our laboratory, I think it sends the wrong message, and it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. And we want to create an environment from the legislature that draws more business to our state and is more favorable to businesses and corporations. And that's what I would be focused on, is creating a regulatory and tax environment that attracts businesses here, not drives them away. Thank you.
Another question?
No. I'll first talk about my ideas, and then I'll talk a little bit about SB 17. I think one thing that's critical for this community, and as I said, certainly for Santa Fe, is the lack of workforce and affordable housing. And that is constricting access to employees for our local employers. And on the council, that has been a priority of ours, and we have been making some inroads in increasing the housing stock, both for workforce and for market rate housing, with the aim of course, loosening up some of the less expensive houses for individuals who want to work here. You hear that routinely when you talk to local businesses, that they can't find the workforce to work in their businesses, and that's a critical thing. And we on the council have worked towards that, and we will continue to do so. Certainly public transportation is also assisted, and we will soon be putting in an affordable housing complex that is on the bus route. There are some 70 plus units that we'll be offering, and that will make some inroads, but it's a constant issue and it's a critical issue. And as I said, it's also one that has been popping up in Santa Fe, and we need to be working to advance ways to increase housing for lower income workers. With respect to SB 17, it's an interesting thing. We have met with the director designee, and he does not share Ms. Shin's view of taxes. He considers it something that the lab would be more than willing to pay, assuming that DOE allows them to do so. And it's because the lab management recognizes, in order to attract top-notch scientists, employees, etc., you need to have a town that is strong, that has amenities and housing that can support the workforce. If this town reverted to what it was when I first came here 20 years ago, it was unattractive, had few amenities, and yet we were paying the same sorts of property taxes that we are now. And we could not offer children in this town, the kinds of activities that they wanted. The pond did not look nearly as attractive as it does now. When you come into town, you see a town that is beautiful. It shows that the community cares about it and respects itself. We maintain it in a much better way than we have. And as a result, people want to live here. And people love living here. Lab employees love living here. And so I think it's very short-sighted to suggest that we should take a $20 million GRT hit, or a $17 million, however you slice it, simply I'm not really sure what it accomplishes. The lab has the funds, and they are willing to pay.
So the next question we'll have Chris answer again, and both of you have touched on this. This is a bit more specific regarding SB 17. So the question of Triad's taxable status is still unclear. If Triad ends up as a not-for-profit and is not paying gross receipts tax, would you be supportive of a bill similar to SB 17 last year that had broad bipartisan support but was eventually vetoed by the governor, that would require a not-for-profit to pay tax if they were managing Los Alamos or Sandia National Labs?
Short answer, yes, obviously. And I worked very hard with my colleagues on the council and with our contacts at the state legislature to ensure that that bill passed. And, you know, when you think about it from the broader state perspective, what they see is a functioning corporation, and that's what the laboratory is. It's a scientific institution, no doubt about it, but it's a very large, complex, functioning corporation that others not on the Hill see as not carrying its weight in terms of the tax revenues to the state. And they have begun to question why it is that an entity that has a $2.5 billion budget is not carrying some of its responsibilities to share in providing for the children of the state. 40+% of the educational budget is from the general fund at the state level. And to see an institution that can afford to pay, has been paying for the last several years, not pay now when we are at a critical moment in terms of funding and supporting public education and other things such as economic diversification, is not well received off the Hill. And there, as I said, there was bipartisan, as you said actually, there was broad bipartisan support for the bill, recognizing it was a fair initiative. It's unfortunate that the governor took it upon herself to veto the bill. Otherwise, we would not be in this conundrum of not knowing where we stand in terms of revenues that the county needs to plan and the state needs to plan. The state operates in a very unstable environment because we rely very heavily on oil and gas revenues. We have a boom and bust kind of situation, and what we need to be doing is looking for revenues that are stable. And this is one such avenue. It's not the only avenue. There are other things that need to be considered when we talk about tax reform, and they were discussed. For example, an internet sales tax has been proposed on a number of occasions and has been passed by the legislature, but has also been vetoed by the governor. You can think of other stable resources as well. We do need reform, and the talk has been to broaden the tax base and perhaps even lower the tax rate. But it has to be done very carefully because we do not want to experience unintended consequences where certain municipalities or counties are severely impacted negatively because it has not been thought out carefully and implemented perhaps in stages or so on. But certainly tax reform is needed. There's no question about that. I will support it. Thank you.
So our laboratory has always provided Los Alamos with an excellent quality of life, with world-class education and a safe community, and we've enjoyed that for many years, even before we had the GRTs. My concern with SB 17 is it puts us at a competitive disadvantage one thing that we have to realize is that DOE is looking at cutting funding for all the national laboratories nationwide. So why would they stay in New Mexico versus another state? If there is another state that has better legislation, more favorable conditions in terms of legislation, that's where they would want to move. That's where they would want to move their operations. And as a legislature, we need to do everything we can to keep the operations here. And we need to look at it from a perspective of what is the legislation that will be best for the lab's scientific mission. And, Councilor Chandler here is a legislative analyst. She should have anticipated the governor's veto. She could have easily proposed an amendment to make that legislation fair and equitable. You cannot tax one set of nonprofits without taxing all of the nonprofits in the same way. And that's something that I think, Councilor Chandler should have seen and foreseen and addressed that issue. And the governor was right to veto it. It was flawed, it was inequitable, and it would have further complicated the tax code. We need to be looking at simplifying the tax code. And I personally favor moving more towards a sales tax rather than this GRT, which really burdens the small business owners like us. So I do think that there's other ways of looking at it. Perhaps the lab managers could pay a fee to the community for the cost of doing their business here. But there's many ways that we can look at it. I know that someone told me that in Livermore, there was some kind of negotiation where they would pay a certain amount to the community, and it was negotiated. I think with this legislation, I don't think that was the right approach. I think we need to do everything we can to keep the costs low for our national laboratory so that they can build and expand their infrastructure and their workforce. Thank you.
Many Los Alamos companies have taken advantage of the state JTIP program over the last several years. The program is the top incentive program New Mexico offers, but is annually underfunded. Do you support full funding for JTIP and other economic development incentive programs such as LEDA?
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more what JTIP does? I'm not familiar with that.
So JTIP is the Job Training Incentive Program. It's a program where employers can apply to have a portion of new employees' salaries reimbursed by the state for the first 6 months of employment for a new hire while they're basically in training with a new company on the job training.
Okay.
And it allows for employers to ask for up to 50% of the salary for the new employee to be reimbursed.
Okay. Yeah, I would fully support anything that trains our workforce and improves our jobs for the state. One thing that we should all be encouraged by is right before the election in 2016, we had a 6.7% unemployment rate. And now New Mexico is at a 4.7% unemployment rate. So I think that's really great news. We can do even better. Colorado has a 2.8% unemployment rate. Arizona and Texas have slightly lower unemployment rates than we do, but we really need to get New Mexicans working again. And anything that improves that, trains our workforce, helps with job creation and retaining jobs, I'm going to be 100% behind. So thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I would support fully funding JTIP because I view it as consistent with some of the earlier themes that I expressed in my opening statements. It supports job training and it allows people to advance through some sort of vocational training program, and I'm very much in support of that. I will say though, in general, I am skeptical about tax incentives, and let me talk about LEDA, but in general, I think you have to look very carefully at tax incentives. If you look at the research and the literature, they are viewed as a mixed bag in terms of success in bringing permanent jobs into communities and states, and it often gives an advantage to an outside company that's coming in that's not given to local companies. But having said that, I have participated in decisions to use LEDA, and LEDA is the Local Economic Development Act program that allows local governments, it's an exception to the anti-donation clause in the state constitution that the voters passed some years ago, that recognizes that some participation by local government can assist in a business becoming successful and locating here. And it has been, but again, you have to be very careful in evaluating which programs you're going to support and how that support is offered. Typically, it's offered through the municipal, or in our case, a county/municipal government, providing infrastructure so that it allows us to support a business in infrastructure enhancements. We've done that on A19, for example. We're talking about using it for the Ski Hill Water Project, and those were items that I felt were very appropriate because we're putting in, so for example, utility lines and other sorts of things that are typically fall within the domain of a local government anyway, right? It's something that local governments are meant to do. It's just directing some of the activity towards assisting a business or a group of businesses to allow them to lower their cost of doing business for a while so that they can perhaps grow and thrive. So the Ski Hill one is I consider kind of a twofer, because it will provide water to the ski hill and hopefully make it a more successful and enterprise, but it also provides us firefighting, access to water that will support our need to suppress fire if we have yet another unfortunate, devastating fire. So I support LEDA. It needs to be applied carefully and thoughtfully, but generally it's been successful for many communities, and I would definitely look to ways to continue to support it when I'm in the legislature. Thank you.
Okay. Next question, I believe, Chris, you're up first.
Okay.
So quality K through 20 education is essential to a thriving economy and important to economic development. How do you intend to improve the education system in New Mexico so our schools are attractive to potential new employers and are providing the workforce needed by existing employers?
Okay. Again, that's a topic I touched on a little bit in my opening statement. I believe we need to increase funding to our public school system. We are now, I think, at about 44% of the state's general fund education is. It's dropped. There's a misperception that we continue to throw money at the schools. In fact, as a percentage of the budget, it has been dropping, and that needs to be turned around. A couple of things. We need to, I believe, increase teacher salaries so that we can attract high qualified teachers that will stay in the classroom and not feel the need to look for other positions because they cannot afford to feed their families or support their families. We do not pay our teachers enough, and if we want to attract top-notch teachers, just as the lab uses salary as a means to draw top-notch scientists, we need to be looking at that and stop being, penny wise and pound foolish with our educational staff, and I mean that across the board. We need to try to lower class sizes, which also means we need to probably hire more teachers because the ratio of student to teacher needs to be lower. The studies show effective learning occurs when class sizes are kept at a manageable level. Certainly, infrastructure for the schools need to be improved. Trade education, I touched on a little bit already. Schools can partner with institutions such as UNMLA so that there is a component of training and technical training. We're very fortunate to have that here, but I understand even schools that do not have a UNMLA across the street have found ways to partner with their 2-year colleges, and I would support finding other ways. Distance learning, video classes and that kind of thing have been used to help supplement high school education so that there's some training component to it as well. What else can I think of? This is something that's very important to me. It's something that I focused on when I first decided I was going to run, because as a person whose parents never went to college, who were blue-collar workers their whole lives, I feel I benefited tremendously from the high-quality public education that I had when I was growing up. It allowed me to excel in one of the finest liberal arts colleges in the country and attend high-quality graduate school. That's what I want for the children of the state, the ability to have the foundation so that they can excel in whatever field they choose to excel in. That could be something like what I did, which is as a professional, but also technical fields or other are very important, and that's what I think we need to be doing. Thank you.
Okay. So as small business owners, fiscal responsibility is not just a political talking point for us as small business owners. It's something that we live and breathe every day. So every day we have to find more effective and efficient ways of doing what we do, providing our goods and services. So this is my approach towards education, is how can we improve our state's education in the most fiscally responsible way? And as many of you know, that I have been a very strong voice and advocate for fiscal responsibility in government. And I've called out our county councilors and Councilor Chandler for the wasteful spending and the lack of restraint and limits on our expenditures and spending. And so for New Mexico, we have been consistently increasing our funding for education, but yet we're still not seeing the results. So I think we need to look at better ways of spending our money. Let's see what is working in other states. How is it that Colorado spends less than we do per pupil, but they have better results? How can we replicate the successes in other areas? And even in Los Alamos, what works in Los Alamos? Why are our schools so successful here? It's because we have strong community engagement. Our parents are involved here. We put a high priority on education here in Los Alamos. How can we encourage that and foster policies that encourage that for other parts of the state? One thing that I really want to see passed is a Reading Proficiency Act. And Colorado passed their READ Act, and they put a legislative priority on reading by the end of 3rd grade, and they appropriated funding for that. And it engages the parents, it identifies those high risk students, and they intervene early. And I think we need to do something like that here for New Mexico. It seems like the bill keeps coming up year after year. It's like no one can agree on something, but we have to do something about that. Because without reading proficiency, our kids are not going to be able to succeed. I was in Peña Blanca last month, and one of the ladies told me, our kids can't read. And she just told me, I don't know what is going on with our system and why kids can't read. If they can't read, then they can't do the vocational education. They can't get a job that gets them into the middle class. Reading is essential for success, and so we need to make that a priority here for New Mexico. Thank you.
Lisa, we'll have you answer this one first. State revenues have varied drastically the past several years due to our reliance on the oil and gas industries. Economic diversification would help alleviate some of the variances. How do you define economic diversification for New Mexico, and how will you support it?
Right. Well, economic diversification is really dependent on our expanding the private sector. Unfortunately, we've kind of gone the other way, where instead of expanding the private sector, we've expanded government. And we have a bloated state government. It's increased 50% over the past decade, even though the population has only grown by 8%. And we see this in the county council too. We see a bloated government where there are no limits on expenditures and spending. we have a situation where our county council moves forward on extravagant projects that the voters reject. And so, my perspective on economic diversification is expanding the private sector, and that means putting a limit on tax and expenditures, seeing where we can cut costs, cut wasteful spending, and make it more attractive for businesses to prosper and grow. So thank you.
Could you read the question again? I got distracted.
Yeah. State revenues have varied drastically the past several years due to our reliance on the oil and gas industries. Economic diversification would help alleviate some of the variances. How do you define economic diversification for New Mexico, and how will you support it?
Well, I definitely think that the oil and gas industry plays too much of a role in our economy, and we need to find ways to attract businesses here. And there are a couple ways to do that, and I'll try to answer the question that was actually asked. One is we have other energy sources that we should try to be incentivizing, such as wind and solar. There has not been enough attention to that as a potential industry for the state, notwithstanding the fact that we have 300 and some odd days of sunshine here, and that poor eastern side of the state is so windy. People want to stay inside most of the time. So certainly we need to be looking at other energy sources and ways to transport the energy that is generated from these alternative energies, so that not only do we benefit, but we may also improve our economy by being able to sell that power. The film industry has been something that the state has benefited from, and I would continue to support it. Our little town has benefited from the film industry, and we have seen that by supporting those kinds of efforts, jobs have been created. The state has also been able to market itself through the film industry because people are seeing it on these various programs, and our tourism industry has thus benefited from it as well. So it's a multifaceted problem, and the inputs and outputs have to be addressed on a multifaceted way. It's not going to be any one solution. But lastly, and I'm going back to my original theme in my talk, or my opening statement, and that is, we need to provide the foundation that will want to draw businesses here. And what's that foundation? An educated and trained workforce. We still need that. We don't have it. Why would a business want to come here when our kids are not being educated adequately, and we know that's the case, and our infrastructure is decaying, and it has decayed for the last 10 years, and we need to start focusing on roads, internet, broadband, and utilities. That's what businesses come for. If you read the literature, that's what really brings a business to a state. A strong workforce and a strong infrastructure. So that would be the last thing we need to be focusing on. Improving where we stand on those two issues, I think, are critical to expand on our economic diversification and expanding our economy.
Okay, at our last question, we'll let Chris answer this one first. So data has shown that small businesses and entrepreneurs create more jobs than medium and large-sized companies. How would you support the growth of entrepreneurism in New Mexico?
Well, you just gave me a fact I didn't know, so that's interesting. We've seen it here, and something that we did talk about earlier were some of these state LEDA programs. We have Ubiquity, and it took me a long time to figure out how to say that name since it's a very odd spelling, but that's a local business that the county, through its economic efforts, is providing some initial support to. We helped that company purchase the building in which it's now hiring people, and it's increasing its workforce. And so your point that you made in your initial question, the initial premise, is supported by some the Ubiquity and some of the other smaller companies that we've provided assistance to. And I would think following through on those sorts of initiatives and continue to support LEDA-type programs to support local communities who know their community best and know what needs there are, support spin-offs from the laboratory through some of these kinds of initiatives, I think is the way to go. Thank you.
One of the things I think we should and can look at is replicating the success of Silicon Valley. You know, if you look at the people that are here in Los Alamos, I mean, we have the same people that Silicon Valley has, and yet they're thriving and prospering, and there's so much business and small business being that are growing and expanding. And I just think maybe perhaps we should look at that, perhaps look at intellectual property rights and freedoms, and is there anything that we could do as a state legislature to kind of ease perhaps the regulations and the restrictions over that, so that people are more free to act on their ideas and on their brilliance and starting up a business. Again, we have so much talent here in Los Alamos, and I would love to see kind of more support for small businesses that act on that talent and utilize that talent in the most effective way possible. So, thanks.
Thank you very much. That is our final question. If the candidates would like to stay and visit with the chamber members, we'd be delighted. I do just want to remind everyone that in October we will have the county council candidates here, and it will be a similar forum. So I hope that you can all join us in October. Please be sure and register ahead of time, and please join me in thanking the candidates. We're good.
I wondered about that, but I didn't want to say anything.
Listening to the closing statements.
Maybe we'll let Lisa go first.
Oh, yeah, good. Sure.
Okay. Well, I am the only candidate here who is endorsed by the National Independent Business Association. So I'm very much aligned with the interests of the small business community. And as a small business owner myself, you know, I am very aware of the challenges and the frustrations that we face every day. And so I am 100% committed to being a strong advocate and voice for small business owners. You know, as small business owners, many of us just don't have the time to hire, or we don't have the time to navigate the complex regulatory and tax code. We can't afford the expensive lobbyists who can be an advocate for us. And many of us, and as I was for many years, I didn't have time to even get politically involved because we're so busy running our businesses and making sure that we can keep our doors open. So that if I'm elected, you know, I am going to be your advocate and I am going to be your voice. And you can count on me to work towards reducing the tax burden on you and reforming the tax and regulatory code so that it is more favorable to you and to your business prospering and expanding, and your ability to hire more people and improve the goods and services that you offer our community. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your attention. I very much enjoyed the dialogue and the interesting questions. And I thank the Chamber again, and Ren and Patrick, for this event. New Mexico is at a critical juncture, and we face many challenges. The lack of a diverse economy, unstable and volatile sources of state revenues, significant poverty, a public education that is failing many of its students, a rampant substance abuse problem that tears families apart and causes our prison population to grow. These challenges will require the legislature to set aside partisan divisions and to foster an environment that will encourage collaboration and problem solving. My experience of service to the community has shown that I can and will work with people of different backgrounds and perspectives to achieve consensus and positive outcomes. And I look forward to serving the district, and I ask for your support.
Now, I would like